Hey everyone, I'm Jay Smith, and today I'm joined by Evan McDowell, Bradley Kendall, and Jack McLaughlin, and we're going to be bringing you a very special edition of After Further Review. Basically, the way it's going to work this evening is we're going to do a roundtable discussion of our top 8 teams. If we have time later in the show, we're going to get into some Power 5 conference championships and go into some of our picks and analysis for those. So fellas, after further review, we've made it through the season, 12 weeks of football. It's hard to believe it's already flown by.
Yeah.
And
it's playoff time now.
It's playoff time. Got to get through those conference championships first. And we're going to go ahead and dive in and look at our number 8 teams for our rankings. If we can go ahead and get those pulled up. So Bradley, you picked Wisconsin.
I got Wisconsin at 8.
Jack, you picked Michigan.
Real low.
Yeah.
Ooh. And I picked Wisconsin. And Evan is going to go with USC.
Okay.
I guess we'll start at our right and we'll work our way down. Jack, why don't you explain to us your thoughts on your pick?
So my argument with Michigan going behind a lot of the other Big Ten teams is that realistically speaking at this point they have no chance of making the playoff. So I thought that my rankings kind of reflected more of the chances of a team making the playoff. Therefore I had Michigan farther down than I'd say like a Penn State or Wisconsin. But that was kind of what I was looking at. I still think Michigan's a great team, and the head-to-head with Wisconsin and other teams that they've played, I think that their resume is good, but mine was based more off of who can make the playoff and who's going to be playing in January.
Okay, fair enough. I kind of went down the approach of, the best team as opposed to the best chance to make the playoff, which is why I put Wisconsin down there. Yes, they still have a chance to make the playoff theoretically if they win in the Big Ten championship, but at this point, looking at their, their resume, the way it ranks compared to the other teams, I only see them with really one quality win right now, which was LSU in the beginning of the year. And otherwise, the only reason we really have them up there is for their losses, which was to Ohio State and Michigan. So other than that, their lack of offensive production, they got a great defense, but I just don't see them.
Well, that goes into what you just pointed out, how they lost to Michigan. So for me, I'm assuming you're going to have Wisconsin higher up because they have an increased chance of making the playoff if they win the Big Ten. And you could make that argument that they deserve to be in. But the fact that they lost to Michigan in that head-to-head, for me, is why I have Wisconsin down at 8. I mean, yes, they finished 10-2. They lost to Michigan in Week 5, Ohio State Week 6. But in that span, in Week 4, they played Michigan State, who at the time was still ranked high. I think they were a top 10 team when they played them. So they had a tough 3-game stretch there. And you could argue that those 3 games, that slate kind of, it'll take your toll, take its toll on the team. But, as far as the rest of the season goes, they won all their games convincingly, dominating fashion. So they deserve to be in the Big Ten championship. But, that's why I have them down there at 8.
All right, well, with my number 8 team, I took a completely different approach than the 3 of y'all. Y'all went Big Ten. I decided to go out west with the Trojans of USC, who, besides Bama, I don't think anybody is playing better than them in the country.
Well, speaking of Bama, they throttled.
Got
throttled by Bama in Week 1.
That's true.
They're the only 3-loss team right now in the top 10. So
well, I think in the actual playoff poll they're like 11. I don't think they're actually in the top 10. But they've been playing really well. They started off 1-3, like you said, with that loss to Bama in the season opener, which was just bad.
Yep.
And then they beat Utah State, and then they lost back-to-back games to Stanford and Utah, who were both ranked at the time they got beat. So not terrible losses. They're on an 8-game win streak right now. They beat Colorado and Washington as part of that 8-game win streak, probably the 2 best teams in the Pac-12 playing for the Pac-12 championship this weekend. So I think those are pretty impressive wins for the Trojans. And during their 8-game win streak, their quarterback Sam Darnold has thrown for over 2,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, 7 of which went to Juju Smith-Schuster, and 7 interceptions during that 8-game win streak. So I just think it's not the way you start, it's the way you finish. And these last couple weeks of the season, I think USC has been playing about as good a football as anybody. So that's why I got them number 8.
Yeah,
not a realistic playoff shot, obviously.
I don't
with 3
disagree
losses.
with the fact that they're playing really well at the end of the season. I just look at the fact that they started 1-3. They lost, yes, it was a road game for Stanford and Utah. They lost both of those games. But Stanford, by the end of the season, proved to be extremely weak. And that honestly is almost worse of a loss than their blowout loss to Alabama, because you could argue that they're still in preseason form going into a neutral location. And yeah, they got whipped 52-6, but the loss at Stanford and at Utah really stand out to me. And I know that they've played well and won convincingly the remainder of their season, but besides a marquee win at Washington, there really hasn't been anything on their schedule that would really pop to me. I guess you could argue Notre Dame because it's a rivalry game, and I know that you're obviously an Irish fan, but they didn't even make a bowl game this year. So for them to be 9-3 and not even have an opportunity to play in a conference championship. I find it hard pressed to put them. If any team that's gonna, I'll put them in my top 10. I had them at like 10 or something, but I wouldn't put them above any 2-loss teams.
Well, let's not forget though. Stanford has turned their season around. You look at their standings right now; they're 9-3, which kind of is a little under the radar since we've seen how they played this year. And I guess
McCaffrey has gotten it together. For
he's
the second
gotten
half
better.
of the
Yeah,
season.
he had a rough first half of the
Yeah.
season. It was a really bad
And
spin.
that's
from last
huge
year.
for-
Well, and even at the time that Stanford beat USC, they were ranked number 7 in the country. So it's not like they were playing badly. They had that kind of mid-season skid where they kind of dropped off, and now they're kind of collecting it back in time for some postseason play. So I think the committee puts a lot of emphasis on the team that you are right now, not the team that you have been. And I just think that, after we watched those first 4 games from USC, we thought, okay, well, this is going to be a 6-6, 5-7 team, and they pulled it together and made it 9-3.
The thing with Stanford, though, is they finished their season with games Arizona, Oregon State, Oregon, Cal, and Rice. Well, Oregon State is a sub-500 team. Oregon is a sub-500 team. Cal is a sub-500 team. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume Rice, not looking as a sub-500 team.
Probably a sub-500 team.
So you can argue that they were able to rebound, but let's be honest, they should have won those games anyway. So I really wouldn't call any of those wins in the last 5-6 weeks of the season. They played once against Colorado, lost 10-5. None of those wins stick out to me as, resume boosters.
I think you still have to respect the fact that they're hot, though. The USC is playing very well. What have they won? 8 in a row, you said? 8 straight
Game win
wins?
streak. Yes, sir.
That alone can get you up there. It might not get you in the playoff, but I respect the committee for putting them up where they are right now, even with 3 losses.
Right. I don't think they have any realistic chance of getting anywhere higher than
Let's not go
8
that
because
far.
their 8 is probably the ceiling for USC right now. I wouldn't dare put them anywhere higher because there's 7 better teams by far. But I just think the way they've been playing and just the way they've kind of brought their season back together after the rocky start, I just think they're playing like the 8th best team in the country right now.
Fair enough. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on and look at our 7th ranking. We're going to start with Bradley. Bradley's got Penn State, and Jack has got
Colorado.
I put Michigan, and Evan put Wisconsin. So nobody duplicated anything here.
This will be fun.
We want to start on this side now and have Evan go first.
Okay, well, I put Wisconsin at 7, which is a lot similar to the two of y'all putting them at 8. They're on a 6-game win streak, so that's not bad. They've lost to Ohio State and Michigan. Both those games, they only lost by a touchdown, so they weren't bad losses at all, and they were back-to-back. I think a lot of people kind of forget that they had to play Ohio State and then have to play Michigan the week after, which is a tall task for any team in the country, and to only lose by a touchdown to both of those teams, who are probably 2 of the 5 best teams in the country right now. I think that is impressive, I guess, as far as losses go. Probably the best 2 losses in the country. They do have the 16-13 season opening win against LSU, and LSU preseason probably too high of expectations, firing Les Miles mid-season. There was kind of a little disjunction there.
Well.
Oh yeah,
I think they rebounded better than any team in the country, especially under an interim head coach. I haven't seen that kind of success under an interim head coach since, I guess you could argue, Dabo Swinney, because I'm pretty sure his interim year he won all those games except
South Carolina.
No, he won as an interim.
He won that first year. That's what got him to
I think he had
full-time
one loss.
job.
He was like 4-1, 5-1. But yeah, he did. Ed Orgeron did an amazing job.
And they hung with Alabama for 3 quarters. They had a realistic chance of beating Alabama. So Wisconsin has played well at times. Their 2 losses, I think they still played well. So it's not like they've had a bad game at all. But again, there's 5 or 6 other teams that have probably been better than Wisconsin. So that's why I got them at 7. But still a really good, solid football team.
Yeah, at 7 I had Michigan. Obviously they're 10-2, and they started the season with a 9-game win streak. They did lose to Iowa in Week 10 on that last-second field goal. That was part of that whole weekend of the top 10 just absolutely crumbling. And then obviously they lost to Ohio State in double overtime last week. They have a really good win against Penn State. They beat them 49-10 earlier in the season. That really stands out to me, especially with Penn State having a good chance to come home with the Big Ten championship. They beat Colorado 45-28. That's something you have to look at. It would really be interesting to me that, let's say Colorado beats Washington and wins the Pac-12 championship, and let's say Penn State wins the Big Ten. So you've got Penn State as a Big Ten winner and Colorado as a Pac-12 winner. Michigan has beaten both of those teams. So where would you put them?
But let's not forget, during those games there were injuries. I mean, I don't know if you remember the Penn State and Colorado
Well,
game.
I wouldn't consider it on the same level as like the Ohio State-Nebraska game that ended up being 62-3 when Nebraska's quarterback went out.
Well,
But
Nebraska
there's-
was already getting blown
but
out.
injuries are a part of it.
Yeah, I mean,
Guys
Colorado
are going
was
to go out in big games.
Colorado was beating Michigan at half before their quarterback got hurt, and then they, obviously the rest of the game they didn't do much. But I think that does play a factor, though, the fact that there was an injury.
Yeah, and they also beat Wisconsin. So honestly, regardless, Michigan is going to have a win in the regular season over whoever the Big Ten champion is, and they potentially could have a win over the Pac-12 champion. So I honestly think that's a really interesting conversation. Now, a lot would have to happen. You have to have like Clemson lose and other stuff shake up for Michigan to have a chance at somehow creeping back in there, especially with the fact that they lost to Ohio State. But I think solely based off the fact that if they had a win against a Pac-12 champion and the Big Ten champion, that it would make for at least in a debate.
You can make the same argument about Pittsburgh, though.
With having a win against
They've beaten
Clemson
Penn State and Clemson.
yeah.
That would be an ACC champion and also maybe a Big Ten champion.
Pitt finished with 8 or 9 wins.
8, I believe, and they were 8 and 4.
So they're a bit. I mean, I understand.
But I'm just saying.
I totally get that argument.
Craig's top 25
But
this week.
Michigan again has played extremely well the rest of their schedule. They obviously have 10 wins. Very close to having 11. And with the last second field goal of Iowa, you could argue that those 2 losses are the closest so far this year. But anyway, that's why I had them at 7.
Then I had Penn State at 7. Kind of when you stack up the teams, when I look at Penn State, I really look at that Ohio State game, and I think most people would. But when you look at the rest of their schedule, I mean, I know they have played a lot better. They've improved since their loss from Pitt and from Michigan. But as you were saying with what was it, Stanford, kind of the weak schedule. I mean, Penn State's beaten Purdue, Iowa, barely beat Indiana, Rutgers, and Michigan State. I believe only one of those teams has a winning record. So, I mean, Penn State is playing well, but I think when you stack them up against the rest of the teams, kind of like Wisconsin, they only really have one quality win to go off and really not much else. So I like the way that James Franklin's turned them around, but other than that, I really don't see anything I can do to put them ahead of some other teams that are above them.
You see a potential contract extension for Franklin?
Oh, absolutely. At this point, absolutely.
After this type of season, yeah. Especially if they beat Wisconsin, yeah.
Now, let's not forget, I know you had a stat earlier this week that said he's only like 24-14 overall over the course of his 3 years or something.
Yeah,
so
he started out 2 years of 7-6.
Yeah.
So he had 2.
Those are 2 years of sanctions and everything that he had to deal
2
with.
years of
2 years of Christian Hackenberg under center.
Yeah.
So
building,
do what you can with what you got.
For sure. But let's not get off topic. Let's go for your number 7. You had.
So my number
Colorado.
7 was Colorado. That obviously this is going off the same argument that like Colorado has a realistic chance of making the playoff, but when you look at their losses, they've lost to a Michigan team who's proven to be pretty good throughout the season, and they played them when Michigan was, I would say, in their better form. They looked better Michigan looked better in the beginning of the season than they did near the end. It seemed like after that Iowa loss, it kind of broke them a little bit. Because when you watch the Ohio State game, it was like I was watching it and I just felt like Michigan was trying to lose the game near the end there. They just weren't playing like they used to, where they just kind of had that edge over every team. That was
That's fair.
I mean, I just think that Michigan hasn't been playing as well as they were beginning of the season. And when they were playing the beginning of the season, they played Colorado, and I think that definitely helps Colorado's case, is that they played Michigan when they were kind of in their prime.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, all good points. Interesting already. We're disagreeing on where we got teams. We're going to move on, though. Look at number 6. Bradley puts Colorado at 6. Jack has Wisconsin. I have Colorado. And Evan is going with Penn State. So it's another round of everybody with differing opinions. I guess we'll start over again with Jack, and you can tell us why you picked Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. So Wisconsin has done nothing to hurt their resume. They've lost to the teams that they probably should have lost to, and they've beaten every other team that they should have. Now, realistically speaking, like Bradley was saying, their resume isn't the strongest. The teams they've beaten aren't like quote unquote great teams, and they've lost to the teams that were the great teams. So I don't know. I guess I'm just going off of that. They haven't lost to a team that they weren't supposed to, or they haven't lost to a team that
There hasn't been a shocking loss. There hasn't been a Pitt game. There hasn't been an Iowa game.
They've taken care of business, but at the same time, they haven't proven that they're ready for the spotlight.
That's fair.
Yeah, and that carries weight, definitely, if you can play well against a good team and still lose.
And the Big Ten championship will kind of show if they can play in the spotlight, because this is huge spotlight. You got a good team in Penn State, so.
Well, speaking of spotlight, just to go off on what you're saying about Wisconsin, to their credit, 4 out of their first 6 games were against against top 10 opponents at the time. LSU was 5 in the season opener, Michigan State 8, Michigan 4, Ohio State 2. So they went 2-2 in those games. Obviously, Michigan State's probably the best 8-loss team in the country. LSU.
My thing, though, with those 4
besides
games,
Ole Miss.
with
Right.
those 4 games that you listed, let's be honest, Michigan and Ohio State are the 2 better teams out of that 4. I mean, I know
for sure.
I know LSU had the rebound, and it was, obviously a game that was an opener, so you could argue it's preseason.
Still a
form.
good win, though.
But Michigan State, I don't really count.
I
Michigan
don't
State
know that
beginning of the
No, it's not.
season was not showing anything. But
No.
I think near the end of the season they started to get it together because they played well against Michigan and Ohio State.
When
That wasn't
they
home, though.
lost, when
Yeah.
Michigan State lost that game, that to me kind of signaled, okay,
Yeah.
because they lost, I think 30-6.
It was a blowout.
It was a
Yeah.
bad loss.
It was-
so it
Yeah.
kind of signaled to me that
Yeah.
their season was kind of already.
Well, and I think the only reason Michigan State was probably ranked so high early in the season was because they were still riding the, we made the playoff last year wave. But that still, I don't know, at the time, a good win.
What about you?
Colorado was 6.
Yep.
I was tempted to put him at 5, but I had to keep him down just because of the head-to-head with Michigan. Michigan ended up winning that game. I really have liked Colorado. I was a big doubter of them earlier this year because they just really hadn't done anything yet. They were kind of like Nebraska, where they were just hanging around for no reason. But a big win over Washington State, and now they have a chance, obviously, to win the Pac-12 championship. I really like their quarterback play. I think if they would beat Washington, I would leap them over Michigan. I think they have the most to prove, obviously, out of all these teams. But at this point, I got to keep them at 6, just below Michigan.
Yeah, I don't know why I said that everybody has differing teams once again, because obviously we both picked Colorado at 6. But anyway,
You just like being different than me.
yeah, Colorado, they finished 10-2. They did lose to Michigan week 3 and USC week 6. That loss kind of sticks out to me. Even though USC, like we talked about, has kind of rebounded a little bit, they're still a 9. They haven't gotten to 10 wins. But if they're able to beat Washington for a Pac-12 title, I think that kind of
Solidifies them, yeah.
validates that they're a worthy champion, and with other things that could possibly go on as far as conference championships go and other teams losing, they could potentially get in, and I think that argument could be made for an 11-2 Colorado team,
For sure.
with losses to only
Right.
Michigan and USC.
All right, well, my 6th team was Penn State, and like you said, Bradley, I was tempted to put them at 5, but I couldn't put them over Michigan just due to the head-to-head. But Penn State has been probably one of the hotter teams in the country recently as well. 8-game win streak after starting 2-2, which I think if Penn State starts 2-2, you start thinking, okay, here goes James Franklin with another 7-6 season. Look forward to the Pinstripe Bowl, So the fact that you can kind of come back from that, win 8 games in a row, beat Ohio State, put yourself in the Big Ten championship game, winning probably the toughest division in college football this year.
Easily, yeah.
You got 2 top 5 teams in your division, and you're coming out on top playing for the conference championship.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty impressive. The bad loss to Michigan, which was kind of early in the season, kind of before they got going. So there is that kind of holds them back from being a little bit higher for me. But Penn State been playing really well, and we'll see if they can carry that over, maybe win the Big Ten championship, and see if they can't be a Cinderella in the playoff.
Yeah. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get up into the top 5 now. Bradley had Michigan at 5. Jack's got Penn State. I have Ohio State.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and
I like that.
Evan has
I like that
got
pick.
Michigan. So
Okay.
we'll start with Evan picking the Wolverines at 5.
Yeah, I think Michigan is probably one of the more interesting teams in college football this year, just because of what they've done, but also what they haven't done. They've got wins over Colorado, Penn State, and Wisconsin, and I don't know if you realize, but they won all 3 of those games in a row in that order. So I think that's kind of impressive. Still, kind of towards the beginning of the season, maybe before some of these teams, maybe Penn State or Wisconsin, kind of got to where they are now. It's still impressive wins. Won all 3 of those games by a combined score of 108-45. So it's not like they squeaked out these wins by a field goal or a touchdown. They weren't very close. But the only reason I put them at 5 and not higher is because they've lost 2 of their last 3 games. They lost to Iowa, which is just a bad loss. Indiana, they beat, which was a close game. It was only 20-10, which you would think.
Their offense has not looked good these last
No,
3
their
weeks.
offense has not been good.
Not at all.
Their offense has looked sluggish.
Their offense has not been good. And then they lost, of course, to Ohio State. And they played Michigan State real close, 32-23.
Rivalry game, though. Both
Well, yeah,
teams
exactly.
rivalry
But,
game.
Michigan State did that the last 2 games. They
Ohio
played
State,
close
too.
to Ohio
They
State.
played
and
Ohio State
Michigan.
close too, yeah. So, Michigan has been very good at times, but they've also not been very good at times. Right.
Almost
So
worse than Louisville, although Louisville kind of has
Oh,
imploded these last 2
Louisville
weeks.
imploded after
I mean,
they lost.
God,
after they
Do
realized
you
they
even
were out
count
of
that
it.
as a good win anymore if you're Clemson?
I still count it as a good
it was a good win at
It
the
was
time.
at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that
I think
because
that was
these
a young
losses are
team.
so late in the
I think it was a
season.
young team,
Right.
and once they were out of the playoff, they kind of gave up on it. And
Yeah.
part of that is the
like
coach. The
Oklahoma.
coach has to keep them.
Years back. In the
Shout out Lamar Jackson. Thanks for blocking me on Twitter, bud. So that's why Michigan's at 5, not in the playoff for me, just because of the bad loss to Iowa, the good loss to Ohio State. You got 2 losses. You're not in the conference championship game. I can't put you in the playoff.
Well, the reason I have Ohio State out of the top 4 and at 5, I mean, I know they finished 11-1. Their only loss was to Penn State in Week 7, obviously on that. I think it was a botched field goal, right, that was returned?
Well,
Ruth?
yeah, 4.5 minutes
Yeah,
left in the
there's
game.
still some time left.
That was what won the game.
That was what
yeah.
won the game. And they did beat Oklahoma in Week 3, Wisconsin Week 6, Nebraska Week 9, and Michigan obviously last week. But my biggest thing is they cannot play for a Big Ten championship. And I don't want to reveal who I have it for, but I just don't think that there's room this year for a non-conference champion, even if they're one loss. I get the argument. It makes for a very easy clickbait title.
Right.
Ooh, Ohio State could squeak out even a Big Ten champion or a Pac-12 champion into the playoff, and you could have 2 Big Ten teams. But let's be honest, at the end of the day, I just can't see a one-loss non-conference champion getting in over even a 2-loss conference champion.
Well, it's not even a 1-loss non-conference champion, because that could imply that you just lost in your conference championship game. You didn't even qualify for your conference championship game. You didn't win your division.
If Penn State wins the Big Ten, how would you be able to put Ohio State above Penn
You
State?
can't.
Because
can't.
Penn State has beaten.
I don't think you could. Yeah.
beat you head to head, beat you in the division, and then won
and
your
the
conference championship.
So there is no argument for the Buckeyes. I understand that they played, really well down the stretch, except for that one loss to Penn State. But at the same time, one loss is sometimes all it takes.
Penn State has the resume to top
The
Ohio State
fact
right
fact that they couldn't get into their conference championship for me is what puts them out of the top 5.
Right.
And I think that that's reflective of what the rankings will look like at the end of the day.
I think
100%
Ohio State have to
agree.
beat
100%
with Penn
agree.
State.
100%
There you
agree.
go, right there.
Love it.
All right, you're up.
Kind of the same points you had with Michigan, kind of add on to that. It's an interesting stat I heard today that Michigan, they've only won 1 game outside of the state of Michigan, and that was Rutgers.
Wow.
So they haven't proved anything on the road. They did lose to Ohio State. Honestly, lately I haven't been impressed with them at all. Like you said, lost 2 out of 3. Really the only reason I had them up there was because they beat Colorado and they also beat Penn State. So I'm not impressed with them at all, but I have to put them at 5. I don't think there's any chance they'll make the playoff.
You haven't been big on the Wolverines all year. We've been
still
going
have
back
not,
and
and
forth
I'm-
on this all year.
I am so happy they're finally giving me reasons to hate them now.
Are you just not a fan of Harbaugh, or are you just not?
Oh, I love Harbaugh. I'm not a fan. I think a lot of it had to do with the preseason hype. It had Harbaugh.
Well, now, a lot of teams get preseason hype. Florida State, Notre Dame, no offense, USC.
they
I mean,
I guess
seriously,
Michigan
there's teams
State,
every.
yeah.
Miami
Oh,
won
gosh.
4 games and
Don't
they were in the
even
top
start.
10. And then they lost to Florida
lot of
State.
it was
they lost
name
4 in a
brand.
row.
The coaches,
There's
some of
so
it was the
many. I get
coaches.
that point, but there's so many teams every year that get so much hype.
I just think that's
Oklahoma?
the reason they started there, and that's the reason they
Yeah.
continue to stay there.
Yeah.
And they did win some quality games. Remember, Colorado had a hurt quarterback. They lost to Iowa. They did beat Wisconsin at home, barely.
But the hurt quarterback doesn't make up for your defense giving up 45 points.
Well, no, but you'd think at least after they scored 28 points in the first half, they'd be able to probably replicate that, if not a little bit less. So you think they'd at least make it close. It wasn't a blowout. I don't know. I haven't been impressed with them at all. They didn't close out the game against Ohio State.
Yeah,
They should have
you
won.
had it high on them all year.
The defensive stats were a little skewed just because they hadn't played good teams.
Well,
so-
Big Ten competition, you're saying that's not good teams?
But they're out of conference schedule that
They're out of
play.
conference schedule.
That's why they were
should be
kinda
desired.
there.
I can
Yeah.
agree with that.
It kind of goes back to Michigan didn't finish the season strong.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the
That's
playoff
the
committee
worst.
looks at that
You
very
can't lose
closely.
2 of your last
You
3
can't, no.
games and
Yeah.
still make the playoff.
That
You can't
really
do it.
hurt them.
No, because they're going to put the team in the playoff and the team that they are now, and they don't want to see a team that's lost recently in the playoff.
Yeah.
So, Jack?
Jack, yeah.
Alrighty, so the reason I have Penn State so high is basically because I understand you guys respect the head-to-head, but it comes back to Michigan was a different team beginning of the season. Once they played Iowa, it was like I said, they kind of broke. They kind of broke down. So when Penn State played them, Michigan was in their prime and Penn State was still growing. Penn State's a different team now. I think after the Ohio State game, I think they've really started to get it together. And the one thing that we talked about earlier was that Michigan State gave Ohio State and Michigan a game, and they played Penn State after both of those games, and Penn State whooped them 45-12.
Well, it was close for about 3 quarters. Then they did turn it on.
And then
in the
fourth quarter they
but
just turned it on.
it
But
was a close game.
But it just, I mean, that just kind of shows Penn State's, they got their game together right now, because you can't compare like transitive property, like, oh, like Michigan State played well against Michigan, but it still looks very good for Penn State when Michigan State gives Ohio State and Michigan games at the end of the season, and then after those 2 games they go play Penn State, and Penn State just whoops their butt.
That's a fair argument.
Okay.
Yeah,
I like
that's a
that.
Fair argument.
Yep.
And they've turned the, sorry, I have to go over turnovers.
you-
They turned the ball over only 5 times in the month of November.
Wow.
That's
and
impressive.
How
and
many
the
interceptions
one
do you know?
5 for the whole season for Trace.
Wow.
And
That's impressive.
And
not bad.
2, I think 4 of their turnovers came from just the Pitt game.
And we've
Correlation
talked
victories.
extensively about the turnover bug that Clemson seems to have
They-
pop up.
they
Deshaun
had-
Watson's thrown 14 picks this year.
Now, I will be honest.
Oh, those were tipped.
Well, some of them went, but I will be honest, when you made that point about after the Iowa game, Michigan kind of got broke, whereas when Clemson lost to Pitt, I almost feel like that galvanized the team into really finishing.
Getting it together.
Strong these last, and they have. I mean, they played
Yeah.
poorly at times against Wake. It was a little sluggish on offense, but the
Yeah.
South Carolina game was nothing short of perfect.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think those are all legit arguments, though. But now we're going to get into the real fun stuff.
Here we go.
Top 4. Cue
This is
the
what really
graphic. Here
matters.
we go. So number 4, Bradley, you have Washington. Jack also has Washington. I've got the Nittany Lions. And Evan has Washington.
It's all against you, Jay.
on
Oh,
time.
boy.
I said, do I need to go first?
Convince
I'll let
us.
you go
Yeah, you
first,
go
yeah.
ahead.
Okay. So the reason that I have Penn State at 4 and not Washington is because Penn State, I feel like, has the best chance to win the Big Ten championship. They're 10-2 right now. They did lose to Pitt and Michigan, but they beat Ohio State. And again, with the fact that they've beaten them head-to-head, that's why I had the Buckeyes at 5. The fact that they could win the Big Ten championship is also why I have them in the top 4. And I think that if they win the Big Ten championship, they will make the playoff as the 4th team. I do not think that a one-loss Washington being 11-1, I don't think that you could put Washington below Penn State.
Right.
So that's my reasoning for putting the Nittany Lions at 4. And to be honest, again, I think that if Penn State wins the Big Ten championship, I think the SEC will play the Big Ten, and I think the ACC will play the Pac-12 champion. That's just my personal opinion on why Penn State's at 4. Whoever wants to go next.
We can all go together, to be honest.
Y'all all
Good.
pick,
Well,
all pick the Huskies.
Evan and I both went first now, so Bradley, you want to go first?
Yeah,
Get
you
some
go
content?
ahead, Brandon.
Knock it out.
So
Sure
Washington, obviously, the beginning of the year, I was not thoroughly impressed with just their schedule. I know the committee was kind of bringing that up, that they had like the 127th best non-conference schedule, or worse.
Yeah,
you
they're
could
not
say.
schedule is weak.
It's weak, but recently they have turned it around. They have Utah a win with that. They beat Washington State, and they have a chance to beat Colorado.
Yep.
I think like what we were talking about, the best chance to make the playoff, I think they have a great chance to win the Pac-12 championship, and if they win that, it's going to be hard to keep them out. It's a little interesting, though, with the Ohio State argument, because with such a great resume for Ohio State, it kind of matches up with Washington, and I just don't know how that's going to really play out. But I think compared to the teams below them, Washington has been the most impressive as of late. So on that basis, I'll go with them at 4.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I'll just make it quick. They started 9-0. Good hot start. Their offense was clicking. Lost to USC, who, like I said, has probably been one of the better teams in college football the past couple weeks. So not a terrible loss there. Won their rivalry game, the Apple Cup, 45-17, which is about the equivalent of us beating South Carolina 56-7. I know Washington State probably not the best team, but they were ranked. That's a
Better than
rivalry
Carolina.
game.
Yeah, better than
most
Carolina.
A lot of
definitely.
people
Not
like
even
that.
close.
Watch that Palmetto.
Not even
Like,
close.
It was.
I think that was a good win to solidify the end of the season for Washington, though,
Yeah.
because
It was a good way to
Washington-
go into the Pac-12 championship game, which I think they have a realistic chance of winning.
Rivalry game.
I won't give away my pick for the Pac-12 championship yet, but Jake Browning, over 3,000 yards on the season, 40 passing touchdowns, 4 touchdowns on the ground. Washington's offense is good.
Taking Washington, folks.
You never know.
And
You never know.
might change his mind.
And for Washington to go up against Luke Falk, who's a very good quarterback,
Oh, yeah.
and to only let him have 17 points bodes well for them and their
Yep.
defense.
And it was on the road.
Impressive.
It was at Washington State.
It
so
was.
definitely
And
helps
you
too.
were honestly a little concerned. You thought that the Huskies may have, if not a lot of trouble, but also
I
potentially
thought that
trip up.
QB.
I thought that Falk could keep up with Washington,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they really struggled. Washington's defense, you got to give them credit for that.
Yeah.
All right. let's
Number
go ahead
3.
And look at the top 3.
Down 3 to go.
Bradley has Ohio State at 3. Jack has got Clemson at 3. I've got the Huskies at 3, and Evan has Ohio State. Who wants to go first?
I can start.
Since you got Clemson ranked the lowest.
Yeah, all right. So right now, strength of schedule, Ohio State's is better than Clemson's, and they both have a loss. But Clemson is playing in the ACC championship, so some of my rankings are based off of what's going to happen in the championship, because I think that plays a huge part into where you're moving up or down after the championships. Because if Clemson wins their ACC championship, then I think at that point they have a much better resume than Ohio State, so therefore they'll jump them. But I think that right now Ohio State technically has one of the best resumes in college football, but the issue is they can't build on it anymore. While some other teams who are pretty...
Better than Penn State's resume?
Absolutely.
With beating Ohio State?
Absolutely.
I think...
I mean, you have to... Where's the valuation of head-to-head there? That's my only concern with putting, Ohio State so high.
Well, my argument is that if Penn State wins the Big Ten, then they'll have a big enough resume that they replace Ohio State.
So you think that could change if Penn State wins the Big Ten championship?
You mean the rankings?
Right. Like, it's in terms of who has the better resume between Ohio State and Penn State. You think that if Penn State wins the Big Ten, their resume becomes better than Ohio State's?
Yeah. So the argument for the college football committee was that Ohio State is still much farther ahead of Penn State. Mm-hmm. Like, I think
even with a head-to-head win.
Yeah, that's what the committee said. They said they're still very far ahead of them. But the way that I'm looking at it is, if Penn State wins the Big Ten, then I think that they're in the playoff. But I think if Wisconsin wins the Big Ten, I think that the committee is going to try and get Ohio State in there because of the head-to-head that Ohio State has over Wisconsin.
Yeah.
But Penn State doesn't have that, or they don't have that against Penn State. So
I wouldn't agree with that, but I could see where that's coming from for sure. So, Bradley, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll go. I had Ohio State, kind of what you were saying. Clemson has a chance to win the ACC championship and get another win against Virginia Tech, which is a top 25 win. So that would kind of match, in my mind, Ohio State's resume to a degree with the 4 top 25 wins. So that's why I had Clemson above Ohio State. To be honest, it's really a tough situation, like I said before. I think Ohio State is going to be in the playoff. I think they deserve to be.
There's no room for a non-conference championship.
I think that the resume is just, lo and behold, so much better.
Without a conference championship?
Even still. Because remember, we talked about with a couple years ago when TCU got booted out. They were at 3, and their resume was not as good as Ohio State's was, as it is right now. As of right now, Ohio State, 11-1. The second strength of record, which is, win-loss.
Okay, but they played at Oklahoma,
which is a top 10 team.
They won Wisconsin. They lost to Penn State. They beat Nebraska handily, obviously, with the quarterback that went out.
And they beat
Michigan State by 1 point, and then they beat Michigan. So there's besides the Oklahoma game, the Wisconsin game, and the Michigan game, nothing really is that overly impressive to put them above 2, if not 3 conference champions.
Oh, I think it absolutely
You're putting
is.
them above the ACC champion, the Pac-12 champion.
I think Clemson would still get in. Clemson would be in.
Do you think they'd be at 2? I mean, it really doesn't matter.
I think they would be.
2's going to play 3.
Yeah, so one of
really
the other.
everybody's goal right now is just don't play Bama in the opening round.
Right.
Yeah.
You're probably going to lose.
It's going to be interesting, though, because if Penn State does win the Big Ten championship and Washington wins, I think Ohio State should be in, and then you just really decide who gets that 4th spot. Would it be Penn State or Washington?
That would be crazy.
I think Ohio, just with their, like I said before, their 26th strength of schedule.
I think Ohio State is a great team, and I think that they probably do deserve a chance in the playoff. But at the same time, they didn't get it done in their conference. Therefore, that's going to hurt them.
They didn't win their division.
I know, that's going to bite them in the butt.
They got in the conference championship and lost.
But look at what the division is.
They didn't even win their division.
Yeah.
So what? You only get the one team to represent the division in the conference championship. So why should you?
Well, I think
just look at the division.
Why should the team that represents your division in the conference championship not be the team that represents your conference in the playoff? Why should it be a team?
No, don't worry about division. Just look at their resume. Look at who they lost to. A great loss to Penn State. Washington,
great loss.
I mean, you can say as many adjectives as you want about the loss to Penn State.
Great losses don't mean anything.
Such an oxymoron.
But they didn't lose to Iowa.
But the
like
fact
a
of
Michigan
the matter
team.
is that Penn State beat Ohio State. Therefore, Penn State plays for a Big Ten champion. therefore Ohio State is below Penn State. So how, if Penn State can't represent their conference for the playoff, then how would Ohio State be able to?
Head-to-head
Ohio
does
State
matter.
lost to Penn State.
Head-to-head does matter, but over the course of the whole year, I think Ohio
this
State
argument-
has had the best season over Penn State, even though Penn State did beat them.
I
You've got to look at the whole
I
season.
think at a certain point, the top 4 teams, and this is just me, the committee wants to find the 4 best teams, but that's kind of subjective. It should be the 4 most deserving teams that are good teams.
Yeah.
So if you look at it now, the rankings this week, I think Ohio State definitely deserves to be in the top 4 because they've played that well. However, after conference championship weekend, the fact that they don't play in a conference championship, didn't even make it to one, I think that makes them less deserving than a conference
You
championship.
can't turn a blind eye just because they have a
just
good
look
resume
at the division
based
they
off of
played in, though.
subjective strength
Right.
of record. Strength of record may be the most aggravatingly unexplainable thing I've ever heard.
I don't know why.
What is that?
Strength of record is an improvement on your strength of schedule. So at the beginning of the year, if you look at
Strength of schedule. What is
No, no.
that?
Strength of schedule is when you look at the beginning of the year and you look at the quality of teams that you're going to play and how people think they're going to be. Your strength of record looks back on
So
how
it's
well you
all
perform.
opinions.
Yeah.
It's not based
That's
on
all this is. That's all this
Strength
is.
of record actually judges how you do it. It takes the
based off of opinions,
and-
based
No,
off of predictions.
Based off of how an average Division I team would
Average Division
perform
I
against
team.
your schedule.
Absolutely. And they have the
So against
second
Ohio
hardest
State's
one.
Who
schedule,
determines how that average team performs? A computer running
By
an algorithm?
computers, Yeah.
Oh.
based on chance.
So
yeah.
we're going back to the BCS, the bull crap system, where the computer
No, this is just a
spits
contributing
out-
factor.
Right.
I think. Do
but
you really
have
think
to
Ohio-
look at the actual physical games of head-to-head. Penn State beat Ohio State. I don't care if Ohio State.
They
beat-
can both
but
get
the
in.
committee has said that head-to-head trumps all when everything else is equal.
And they're not.
Ohio State and Penn State aren't equal.
And
So
they're
if
not
Penn
equal.
State
So the
wins
head-to-head
the Big
isn't
Ten
as important
championship and has the head-to-head, they have 2 checks in their boxes. They've got head-to-head championship over Ohio State.
Right, and I think after this
It'd be
weekend, that'll
ludicrous-
sort itself out.
It'd be ludicrous to put that
This
in
is
over.
this is the argument that I'm making. There's only if Washington wins their game and Clemson wins their game, there's only one spot, I think, and it's between those 3 Big Ten teams. Technically 2, I think. I think it's between Ohio State and Penn State.
Right.
I think there's only one Big Ten team that can get into the playoff. I don't think you can disrespect Washington.
I disagree that if Wisconsin wins, Ohio State has a chance.
I think they have a chance. I don't think they
I've
should.
argued that if
Ohio
Wisconsin
State's
wins,
gonna get in over
Wisconsin could get in.
Wisconsin. Ohio
They
State's
could,
gonna get
but
over
honestly,
Wisconsin.
I could see the committee trying to pull.
It's a low percentage chance, but it could happen. I have Ohio State at 3-2,
wins-
so that's the only reason I'm kind of arguing
Penn
this as
State
well.
wins the Big Ten.
They've got good
Ohio
wins,
State's
good
getting over
loss. They
Wisconsin.
played badly. They're at 3 right
Yeah, no, I think they'll put Ohio State over Wisconsin.
Not so
Absolutely.
fast, my friend. Not so fast.
now. Who was your 3 team, Mr.
Oh
Argumentative?
gosh, I got Washington at 3.
That
Can't
took
even
about
remember
5
who his
minutes.
3 team
Well,
is.
again, like I said a minute ago, with Penn State being at 4, the fact that they're a 2-loss team, Washington's going to finish 11-1 regular season. Yes, they lost to USC, but they're ranked 2nd in offensive efficiency, 3rd defensive efficiency. Again, actual physical numbers that are measured game in and game out, not based off of opinions and computer algorithms. So, again, I know that you could argue that the Pac-12 in some areas hasn't been as deep as it normally is, but I still think with the fact they finished 11-1, they're more than likely going to take home a conference championship. They should be able to get in over a 2-loss Big Ten champion. So that's why I have Washington at 3.
Okay.
Move on though to the top 2. Bradley has the Tigers. Jack is going to have Buckeyes, and I can go ahead and predict what me and Evan have. I've got the Tigers. And Evan
Also has the
also
Tigers.
has-
Spoiler alert,
We're right on
sorry.
that graphic.
There
Come
you
on,
go.
there we go.
I put Clemson at 2, started 9-0. We had a couple shaky games there with a lucky missed field goal. Thank you, NC State. Had a road win over Auburn in the season opener. Not easy to win on the plane, so I count that as a good win. Beat Louisville at the time. Louisville was ranked number 3. Again, a good win at the time. Beat Florida State on the road. Doak Campbell's not an easy place to win. Deshaun Watson over 3,600 passing yards, 34 touchdowns, 4 rushing touchdowns on the ground, and he set the ACC single game record for passing yards in a loss versus Pittsburgh. But Pittsburgh is a better team than I think they're given credit for, so I don't think that loss is as bad as it may look on paper.
Yeah.
In the first 8 games of the season, Clemson averaged 36 points a game on offense. Past 4 games, they're averaging 46 points.
Wow.
They're getting hot at the right time.
Absolutely.
Number 2.
And again, after the Pittsburgh loss, I felt like they did a really
Right, and
good
they
job.
scored 42 points in a home game and lost. So I think that also probably helped contribute to
It's been
the fire that was
turnovers
set under
and
them.
defensive inconsistency. Really, in my opinion,
It's
It's
been
been the
turnovers in
turnovers.
the red zone is what have killed us.
gosh.
Interceptions.
You could have
in the
seven
red
interceptions
zone.
in the
points,
red
yeah.
zone are just
When points just switch to another possession for the other team, that's killer.
I mean,
That's
the pick game
game
was a
changer.
28
14-point
Yeah.
turnover is a
Yeah.
heck of a hole to put yourself in.
Yes.
But
All right. Do you want me to talk about my argument?
I mean, you can. I mean, I'll just kind of follow up real quick with Evan because I also had Clemson again, 11-1. I know they lost to Pitt, but they have good wins. Auburn in the season opener. We talked about Louisville, at Florida State. They could win an ACC championship. And also, I thought that this was really interesting. I came across this stat. They're the only team in my top 8 that also ranks in the top 10 in total yards gained by team this year. So I thought that was an interesting stat. But anyway, yeah, I have the Tigers at 2.
Well, just to branch off of that real quick, I had my roommate. He asked me before I left. He said, "Who has the best chance of beating Alabama?" Because I was looking up some numbers for Alabama and just galled over how good they are. And he said, "All right, well, who do you think has the best chance to beat them?" I said, "I think Clemson does because we have the best offense
Yeah.
out of the potential playoff teams." And I think
as
we're
long as we don't turn the
right. As long as we're playing
we're
as
not
well
doing
as
that
we
right
should
now.
You
play,
turn the ball over against Alabama.
Oh gosh.
and they're going to score a touchdown.
They're going to run it down your
Over.
Either
throats.
return it and make a touchdown, or their
2
offense is going to
interceptions by
score.
Deshaun, that game's over.
I don't know if it's over. I wouldn't call it quite that yet. Because
You've dug
remember,
yourself-
Alabama's
you dug
offense.
yourself a 6-foot
Two
hole.
turnovers against the best defense in college football. I'm
But
not liking
Alabama's
our
offense
chances.
has been a little shaky this year. Remember the LSU game? They only had, what,
Alabama's
10
offense.
points?
What Alabama's
10 points,
offense
but-
lacks in explosiveness, their defense makes up for
Defense
it.
has
That's
more
true.
touchdowns than some offensive teams.
Yeah.
have.
Their defense has accounted for like 63
But
points
remember, we
on the
do have
year.
Deshaun Watson, and you've seen
We
what he
do
can
have
do
Deshaun
when we
Watson.
get down to the fourth quarter. So I wouldn't completely count
I've also
it out.
seen him throw interceptions at the
You have,
5-yard
yeah,
line.
but-
But anyway, that's
Anyway.
why I have the Tigers at 2.
Bittersweet.
Bradley, really quick,
Yeah.
you also have Clemson.
I had Clemson. I really have nothing else to contribute.
All right, Jack, let's hear your argument
All right.
for Ohio
Well,
State.
like I said, Ohio State's resume right now is really strong. Clemson, they both have one loss, but the schedule that Ohio State has played this year, they've played more teams that have proven to be, that have proven that they could have made the playoff. And they had like a good record, everything. Like strength of schedule kind of goes back to that. I know you guys don't like that, but they've played a lot of good teams, and they have a good record come out of it. The same one as Clemson. But I think once Clemson, if they win the ACC championship, that'll put them over Ohio State.
You consider Virginia Tech a good win?
It's a top 25 win.
Yeah, I mean, would you consider it a good win?
9-3 playing for a conference championship, not a bad win.
I would
think
give
it
it
is.
a-
I think you
there
got
were
a
times
you
during
got a
the
great
regular
coach
season
in
when we talked about
Fuente.
Virginia Tech.
Coach of the year?
I don't know.
Yeah, you got a great coach
Yeah.
in Fuente, and then they have a solid trio with the running back, quarterback, and wide receiver. So I think they'll give us some fits.
Well, I'm sure they respect them, but in terms of like resume booster.
It's definitely a good one.
I think it'll help.
I mean, I think it's a lock. I think if Clemson wins the ACC championship,
God.
they're,
Yeah.
they're a lock.
Not
even
They're
close.
a
Yeah.
lock for the
Should be.
playoff.
Yeah.
It's just in terms of seeding, it would either be 2 or 3.
Just to go off of
Like a
Justin
Washington
Fuente real
State.
fast, I read something the other day that it came down to Chad Morris and Justin Fuente for who was going to be
Yeah.
Clemson's offensive coordinator.
Wow.
And Chad
Good
Morris
job.
was chosen.
Wow.
And Justin Fuente has beaten Chad Morris head-to-head before.
Well, Chad Morris
fun.
really
Just for
hasn't been
fun.
able to do much at SMU.
A lot
He's
of
coming
people
back.
beating Chad
Contract
Morris.
extension.
Yeah.
Go Mustangs.
There you go. All right, that was everybody. So we're going to move on to the consensus. number
The
one.
unanimous
Yeah.
number one
Yeah.
across
Country.
everybody.
Roll Tide all the way across the board.
I
Not
think
much.
if anybody
By a
didn't
very
put
wide
Alabama, then
margin.
everybody would have given him.
We would take
Wide
you off the show.
margin.
Yeah, exactly.
Not much
Like-
else to say there. I mean, again, they're the only undefeated team in the Power Five. They have wins against USC, Auburn. They've played LSU. They beat them 10-0. They've beaten Florida. They will
could beat
play.
Florida.
They will play
Yeah.
Florida. And I saw that they're 7-0 against ranked teams on their schedule at the time that the game was played. Now I know some of that is
okay.
some of
yeah.
that. Looking
Some of
back,
that is SEC skewed.
Right.
were those teams really that good? But again, more than likely, SEC champs once again a lock for the playoff.
Can I
Say,
just
yeah, you
throw
go
out a
ahead.
couple numbers about Alabama
Sure.
real
Yes,
fast?
no,
This is
by all
all
means.
okay. 24. That's their overall winning streak. They've won 24 games in a row. 14. That's the number of games they've won against ranked opponents. Now I know a lot of that is probably, like you said, from SEC bias,
Yeah.
but still, I think that's kind of impressive. The defense hasn't allowed a touchdown. No one has scored a touchdown against Alabama since Trevor Knight threw it to Christian Kirk on October the 22nd. No one scored a touchdown on Alabama's defense in the month of November.
Now I will. I know that it's
Oh,
impressive,
God.
but
Oh, my
the
goodness.
offenses they did play,
Right, they
against,
didn't
though,
play great
were below
teams.
100.
Well,
on the
and then,
offense.
yeah, it's been
But I will
200,
say, yeah.
267 minutes and 54 seconds of game time since a touchdown was scored against Alabama's defense. Alabama's defense has accounted for 9 touchdowns on the year. So if there was ever a reason to be more scared of Alabama than the fact that Nick Saban is coaching them, it's because of that defense right there. That is scary.
I do think that Alabama looks a little bit weaker this year than they have in years past. Their defense looks just as good as it always is. I mean, their defense always shows up and shuts down an offense for at least a half, if not more. But their offense is kind of one-dimensional at this point. People have started to realize they can't.
Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback.
Jalen Hurts is a great quarterback.
I'm surprised he's not in the Heisman.
After this
player,
championship, I think they'll start throwing him out there.
Next year. I read something about Jalen Hurts that when he came onto campus in the spring, within 3 hours of stepping on Alabama's campus, he was running the practice team offense to simulate Deshaun Watson to prepare Alabama for the national championship game. That's how good this kid is and how much they think of him down there.
Saban said he was the most mature freshman he's ever seen.
Oh, yeah. He's super good. Yeah. And that graphic actually is wrong. I had Tennessee at number 1. I think they played really well down the stretch. And
hey, they are still ranked.
Just 22.
Well,
get out of here,
we
Tennessee.
got about 5 minutes left on the show, so we're going to go in real quick to the Power 5 Conference Championships. Start at the top. We're going to go alphabetical order in the ACC. I'm not sure if we have. Oh, we do. Okay, we do have a graphic for this. So obviously, Clemson against Virginia
That's
Tech.
pretty impressive.
It would be. It'd be a shocker if anybody else up here.
It's
the way we're playing now.
In theory, statistically, it's a losable game. I just don't think it is, though.
Yeah.
Especially on this level of a game.
I think after this Pitt loss, it really knocks some sense into us, and we'll be ready.
Yeah.
Quick score prediction, why not? Just off the top of your head.
35-17 Clemson.
I'm going to go 45-28.
I want to say like 35-20.
I had 38-17, so somewhere in the
close.
mid-30s, mid-teens, close to 20 point
No
win.
56-7?
I don't think so. I think Virginia Tech's a little bit better in South Carolina.
Moving on, Big Ten, we've got Penn State against Wisconsin.
Wow. Should have picked Wisconsin.
Nittany Lions straight across the board.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I thought you were leaning more towards Wisconsin, but I really like the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, a lot of it's their
I
offense.
think they realize what's at stake, and I think that if they win this game, they know that they have a very, very good chance of locking up a playoff spot, even though it might be 4. It's the 4th seed, so I think Penn State will win.
A lot of it to me is just Wisconsin's offense. It's just been so far, and I think Penn State can just definitely outscore
As
them.
much as I would like to see Wisconsin win this game, just to see what happens with the rankings and all the chaos that would cause, Penn State is a better team than Wisconsin right now. So, and I had them ranked ahead of Wisconsin in my top 8, so that's why I think Penn State wins this game.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Moving on.
27-20, by the way.
Okay.
Touchdown game. Close.
Yeah, I'm not going to
We'll go
go
with
with
that.
prediction for the Big
We'll
Ten
go
because I'm
30-23.
so off.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
With the
You
Big
never
Ten this
know.
year, who knows?
All right, moving on. Big 12, we've got Oklahoma against Oklahoma State. And
I was
once
so close to picking
again-
Oklahoma State, and I
minds think
so
alike.
should have.
Yeah.
I
this
should have
is-
picked Oklahoma State.
Where was this during the top 8 is what I want to know. But yeah, I guess the Sooners are going to cruise.
Too much scoring. Baker Mayfield's hot right now. Oklahoma
Yeah.
State, I don't see Mason Rudolph
Do you
outdoing
think he
him.
has a legit shot at making it to New York?
Baker Mayfield? I don't think so.
No.
Because it helps pad your
he-
stats when you don't play against a real
But if he
defense.
plays,
True,
but if
yeah.
he plays well against Oklahoma State and thrashes them, you don't think that conversation changes?
I could see him finishing 5th or 4th, and everybody in
see
Norman
D.D.
thinking, "Oh, he should have made it to New York," but he
Well,
won't.
you know who's the
I see
product of
D.D.
that.
Westbrook having a better chance than him.
Yeah.
He's been putting up
Fair
200-yard games
argument.
consistently.
He needs someone to throw to him, though.
No love for
Yeah.
Jabril Peppers?
Oh, absolutely.
Nah, he's
Nope.
not gonna.
Go on to
Sorry.
the next game.
Hey, wait, just real quick before we move on from Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State was one bad call in the Central Michigan game away from being a one-loss team that if they beat Oklahoma could be in serious playoff
yeah.
contention
Really unfortunate.
if they hadn't lost that
I
game.
can't say I'm disappointed that they lost to Central Michigan.
I think that would
I'm a
I think
little
that
upset
would that
for
would have
them.
added a lot of fun to have a Pac-12
would've
or
loved
Big
that.
12 team.
Yeah,
in,
you would have
right
5
around 5 or
teams
6.
and Ohio State.
Championship game. They've got to get a championship game.
Next year.
Yeah.
All right.
And this is kind of a championship game, but a little bit.
Close
Yeah.
enough.
All right, moving on. Looking at Pac-12, we got Washington against Colorado.
Ooh,
Bradley, you are out.
got
on
one
Island,
different.
Picking the
One
Buffalo.
different.
You're up, my friend.
I mean, recently Colorado's quarterback, he just reminds me a lot of Tebow, the way he's able to run the ball around and really just outperform any defense he's played so far. Washington, both of them did look great against Washington State, but I saw the way that Sam Darnold just picked apart that Washington defense and the way they weren't able to get anything going on offense. And I just think Colorado's going to be able to do the exact same thing with the way they've been playing lately.
Well, I point back to their Washington's defense performance against Washington State.
Luke Falk, you could argue, is
Colorado
a better
at
QB
kind
than
of the same
Darnold.
thing.
I think Darnold's been more hot, but Falk has proven.
And they shut down
And they made
Washington
Falk
State
look
on
bad.
the road
Yeah.
against
So did
a bad
Colorado.
team.
I was
Colorado
watching the
won
Apple Cup, and
38-24.
it seemed like every other offensive series for Washington State just ended up being an interception.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
turned the ball
Washington's
over a
defense
lot.
played really well in
I'm
the Apple
picking
Cup. Buda
Washington
Baker is going to
based-
be a really good Sunday player.
Based off of their defense, that's why I'm picking the Huskies.
Okay.
Yeah.
It'll be a really close game. I was tempted to pick Washington, but I got a feeling Colorado's going to find a way.
First discrepancy.
I don't think it's going to be close. I think
Really?
Washington's.
Yeah,
I think Washington's offense is too much. I think it's going to be like
Colorado can't score.
42-24.
Not against Washington's defense.
The defensive effort in the Washington
USC
State game is
sure
what
found a
put
way.
me over.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah,
It's the
Washington's
Apple Cup.
defense
USC
looked
found a
good
way.
in the Apple Cup.
Really quick, last game, SEC. I don't even know why we need
This
to put on
graphic
the
is wrong. I
screen.
picked Tennessee to win
I
this game
picked
too.
Ole Miss, so I don't know what's
Tennessee,
going on
SEC
here.
champs.
Alabama gets Florida. Does anyone up here realistically think
Florida.
that Florida could hang with Alabama for
No.
more than
Florida.
a half?
No.
Will win the
Not more than a
championship of
quarter.
life.
Wow. No
No.
love.
I think
No.
of all
There's
the
no
Power 5 conference championship
No
games,
love.
this one is least likely to end up in an upset.
Probably a lot like
This
last
one's
year.
laughable.
Yeah.
Really.
This
We'll see.
I
If-
predicted it to be 31-10, but I'm not going to be the least bit surprised if it's a lot worse
Now,
than
Florida's
that.
defense is good.
Florida
Let's give them
scores 10,
credit.
I'll be impressed.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It could potentially be like 45-0.
Prediction. You hear it? Alabama's defense is going to score more points than Florida's
Ooh,
offense.
bold prediction.
Alabama's
I wouldn't
defense
go
Bold
that
is
prediction.
going to have at least 2 defensive touchdowns.
Whoa.
Florida's not even going to get
All right, I'm going to
It's
say,
not gonna get
all right, my bold prediction for this game is that it comes down to a one-possession game.
I think it's going to be close. I
That's-
really do.
that's my
I'm
bold
not even
You just
prediction.
said
joking.
that they wouldn't be able to hang for a quarter.
I don't think they will, but if I'm being bold here, I'm going to say that it could be a
Okay.
touchdown game. I
All
say
right.
Alabama's due for a bad game. Let's see it happen in the SEC
I think
championship
Florida's
game.
defense is about as equal as LSU's was. They're both very, very strong. Their offense isn't that good at all. But if Florida can keep Alabama, uncomfortable, maybe a lot like the LSU game, I could see it being a low-scoring game. And
If
Florida might have
Bama
a chance.
scores 2 touchdowns in the first quarter, it's game over. Florida has to make sure that they don't score for at least like a half.
Yeah,
for them to stick in it.
out of rhythm, get Saban
Yeah.
frustrated. Now, I really honestly would not want Alabama going into the locker room frustrated because then
That's bad
Saban
news.
is
That's
just
bad
going
news.
to-
I'd rather them.
He's
I'd
gonna-
rather
That
them maul
halftime interview
Florida.
would just set the tone for the rest of the game.
Yeah,
We'll see.
it's like when they had that one loss and they were a 3 seed going into the playoff, or
They lost
maybe
to Ole Miss
not.
or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
it was Ole
it was
Miss.
like they had that chip on their shoulder for the rest of the season, and they were just kicking everybody's butt.
I think if Florida, the only realistic chance they have of winning this game is if they take the Pittsburgh beating Clemson approach and they run a very shifty offense to
Yeah.
confuse Alabama's defense, maybe
fair.
shuttle
I could see
passes,
it.
option, trick play, stuff like that. I think that's the
Frustrate
only
'em.
right.
Frustrate 'em.
Confuse them, frustrate them. That's the only chance Florida would have
Lane
to
Kiffin's
outscore
just an
Bama.
offensive mastermind, though, and you know that Alabama's offense is going to be able to score.
Do you think he's offensive coordinator for Bama next year? You think he jumps ship for LSU? Maybe it
should.
takes a coaching job somewhere.
Unless he's going to get paid more money somewhere, he knows that he's almost guaranteed. He is at least
He's
70%
got
shot
championships
at a
in the future.
championship.
That's
He's
what I-
got too many rings for fingers. At
That's
this
why
point
he
if
left-
stays
that's
around.
why he
Do you
left
think
USC.
he takes over for Saban when Saban leaves? Do you think he sticks
Ooh,
around
I
long
think
enough?
that
I think
far.
that's a very good. If let's say
Something to think
Saban
about.
hangs
I'm not
around-
just saying, but
let's
I'm
say
saying.
Saban hangs around there for another 6-7 years, and
Right.
Kiffin's under him for all of that time. you
Yeah,
can
he
easily
has
make
it.
that.
I think that's what Lane Kiffin's holding on for is the promotion
It might
from
be,
within.
yeah.
Yeah, very
And speaking of
easily.
promotion from within, Mark Helfrich fired at Oregon. First time Oregon football has fired a coach in 40 years.
Yep.
40 years. Every other time a coach left for a better job,
And
and
got
they
some-
promoted from within. So
it
we'll
got
see
some
what they
big
do with
backlash.
that.
Well,
That's for
historically,
sure.
Oregon hasn't been that good. That's why they
Right.
had to fire a coach in 40 years because it's not like there's been any demand.
They don't expect
Chip Kelly
much.
back to Oregon. Anybody else supporting that
I
movement?
don't see it happening.
He's never leaving
I'm,
the NFL.
I'm supporting a movement.
I think he should.
Bring
He
Chip
should,
Kelly.
but
Yeah.
he's never going to leave the NFL.
He
Well,
should.
He's gonna
he
try
hasn't-
not to. He's
Because
gonna
of
try
the
to
1-12
avoid that.
season, he might have to.
Yeah, but that's pretty much going to wrap it up there for us. So thanks again to Ed McDowell and Jack McLaughlin for joining us on tonight's show. I think we're planning on doing one sometime next week
Hopefully
as
so.
our wrap up for the semester, and hopefully we'll be able to do some shows from home and cover bowl season for y'all. So again, thanks to the guys for stopping by. We appreciate it. And
Thank
for
you.
Evan, Jack Bradley, and myself, this has been After Further Review. Thanks for watching.